The Complete Grimm's Fairy Tales, The Devil with the Three Golden Hairs. There was once a poor woman who gave birth to a little son, and as he came into the world with a call on, it was predicted that on his 14th year he would have the king's daughter for his wife. It happened that soon afterwards the king came into the village, and no one knew that he was the king. And when he asked the people the news there was, they answered, "A child has been just born with a call on. Whatever anyone born undertakes turns out well, it is prophesied that in his 14th year he will have the king's daughter for his wife." The king, who was bad of heart, was quite angry about the prophecy and went to the parents, and seeming quite friendly, he said, "You poor people, let me have your child and I will take care of it." At first they refused, but when the stranger offered them a large amount of gold for it, they thought, "It is a child of good fortune. Everything must turn out well for it." And they at last consented and gave him the child. The king put it in a box and rode away until he came to a deep piece of water, and then he threw the box into it and thought, "I have freed my daughter from her undesired suitor." The box, however, did not sink, but floated like a boat. Not a drop of water made its way into it, and it floated too within 2 miles of the king's chief city, where there was a mill, and it came to a halt at a mill dam. The miller's boy, who by good luck was standing there, noticed it and pulled it out with a hook, thinking that he had found a great treasure. And when he opened it, there lay a pretty boy inside, quite fresh and lively. He took him to the miller and his wife, as they had no children, and were glad, and said, "God has given him to us." And they took great care of the foundling, and he grew up in all goodness. It happened that once in a storm the king went into the mill and asked the mill folk if the tall youth was their son. "No," they answered, "he's a foundling. 14 years ago he floated down the mill dam in a box, and the mill boy pulled him out of the water." Then the king knew that it was none other than the child of the good fortune that he had thrown into the water, and said, "My good people, could not the youth take a letter to the queen? I will give you 2 gold pieces as a reward." "Just as the king commands," answered they, and they told the boy to hold himself in readiness. Then the king wrote a letter to the queen, wherein he said, "As soon as the boy arrives with this letter, let him be killed and buried, and all must be done before I come home." The boy set out with the letter, but lost his way, and in the evening came to a large forest. And in the darkness he saw a small light, and went toward it, and reached a cottage. When he went in, an old woman was sitting by the fire quite alone, and he started when she saw the boy, and said, "Whence do you come? Whither are you going?" "I come from the mill," he answered, "and I wish to go to the queen, to whom I am taking a letter. But I have lost my way in the forest, and I should like to stay here overnight." "You poor boy," said the woman, "you have come into a den of thieves, and when they come home they will kill you." Let them come," said the boy. "I am not afraid, but I am so tired I cannot go any farther." And he stretched himself on the bench and fell asleep. Soon afterwards the robbers came and angrily asked what the strange boy was lying there. "Ah," said the old woman, "it is an innocent child who has lost himself in the forest. Quite out of pity I have let him come, as he is to take a letter to the queen." The robbers opened the letter and read it, and in it was written that the boy should, as soon as he arrived, be put to death. Then the hard-hearted robbers felt pity, and their leader tore up the letter and wrote another, saying that as soon as the boy came, he should be married at once to the king's daughter. Then let him lie quietly on the bench until the next morning, and when he awoke, they gave him the letter and showed him the right way. And the queen, when she received the letter, read it, and did as it was written in it, and splendidly a wedding feast prepared, and the king's daughter was married to the child of good fortune. And as the youth was handsome and friendly, she lived with him in joy and contentment. After some time, the king returned to his palace and saw that the prophecy was fulfilled, and the child married to his daughter. "How has that come to pass? I gave quite another order in my letter." So the queen gave him the letter, and said that he might see it for himself what was written in it. The king read the letter and saw quite well that it had been exchanged for another, and he asked the youth what had become of the letter entrusted to him, and why he had brought another instead of it. "I know nothing about it," he answered. "It must have been changed in the night when I slept in the forest." The king said in a passion, "You shall not have everything quite so much your own way. Whoever marries my daughter must fetch for me from hell 3 golden hairs of the head of the devil, and bring me what I want, or you shall not keep my daughter." In this way the king hoped to be rid of him forever. But the child of good fortune answered, "I will fetch the golden hairs. I am not afraid of the devil." Whereupon he took leave of them and began his journey. The road led him to a large town, where the watchman by the gates asked him what his trade was and what he knew. I know everything, answered the child of good fortune. Then you can do us a favor, said the watchman. If you tell us why our market fountain, which once flowed with wine, has become dry and no longer even gives water. That you shall know, answered he. Only wait until I come back. Then he went farther and to another town, and there was also a gatekeeper who asked him his trade and what he knew. I know everything, answered he. Then can you do us a favor and tell us why the tree in our town, which once bore golden apples, now does not even fetch forth leaves? You shall know that. Only wait until I come back. Then he went on and came to a wide river over which he must cross. The ferryman asked him what his trade was and what he knew. I know everything, answered he. Then you can do me a favor, said the ferryman, and tell me why I must always be rowing backward and forth and never set free. You shall know that, answered he. Only wait until I come back. When he had crossed the water, he found the entrance to hell. It was black and sooty within, and the devil was not at home, but his grandmother was sitting there in a large armchair. What do you want? She said to him. Excuse me. But she did not look so very wicked. I should like to have 3 golden hairs from the devil's head, answered he, else I cannot keep my wife. That is a good deal to ask for, she said. If the devil comes home and finds you, it will cost you your life, but I pity you, and I will not see if I can help you. And she changed him into an ant and said, creep into the folds of my dress, and you will be safe here. Yes, answered he, so far as good, but there is 3 things besides that I want to know. Why a fountain which once flowed of wine has become dry and no longer gives even water? Why a tree which once bore golden apples does not even forth put leaves? And why a ferryman always is going backward and forward and never set free? Those are difficult questions, answered she, but just be silent and quiet and pay attention to what the devil says when I pull out the 3 golden hairs. As the evening came, the devil returned home. No sooner had he entered that he noticed the air was not pure. I smell a man's flesh, he said. All is not right here. Then he pried into every corner and searched but could find nothing. His grandmother scolded him. It has just been swept, said she, and everything's been put in order, and now you are upsetting again. You have always got man's flesh in your nose. Sit down and eat your supper. When he had eaten and drunk and was tired, and laid his head in his grandmother's lap, and told her that she should louse him a little, it was not long before he was fast asleep, snoring and breathing heavily. And then the old woman took hold of a golden hair and pulled it out and laid it down beside her. Oh, cried the devil, what are you doing? I've had a bad dream, answered the grandmother, so I seized a hold of your hair. What did you dream of then? I dreamt that a fountain in a marketplace that was once flowed with wine was dried up, and not even water would flow out of it. What is the cause of that? Oh, if if they did but know, answered the devil. There's a toad sitting under the stone in the well. If they killed it, the wine would flow again. The grandmother loused him again, and until he went to sleep, and then snored so loud that the windows shook. Then she pulled a second hair. Ha ha! What are you doing? Cried the devil angrily. Do not take it ill, said she. I did it in a dream. What have you dreamt this time? He asked. I dreamt a certain kingdom. There stood an apple tree that once bore golden apples, but now does not even bear leaves. What do you think is the reason? Oh, if they did but know, answered the devil. A mouse is gnawing at a root. If they killed it, it would have golden apples again. But it gnaws much longer. The tree will wither altogether. But I've had enough of your dreams. If you disturb me in my sleep again, you will get a box on the ear. The grandmother spoke gently to him, picked his lice once more until he fell asleep and snored. Then she took hold of the 3rd golden hair and pulled it out, and the devil jumped up and roared out and would not have been treated her ill if she had not quieted him again and said, who can help bad dreams? What was the dream, then? He asked, quite curious. I dreamt of a ferryman who complained that he's always to ferry one from one side to the other and never released. What is the cause of that? Ah, the fool, answered the devil. When anyone comes and wants to go across, he must put his oar in hand, and the other man will have to ferry, or he will, and then he will be free. As the grandmother had plucked out the 3 golden hairs and the 3 questions answered, and let the old devil alone, he slept until daybreak. When the devil had gone out again, and the old woman took the ant into the folds of her dress, and gave the child good fortune his human shape again, there are 3 golden hairs for you, she said. What the devil said is to your three questions. I suppose you heard. Yes, answered he. I heard, and will take care to remember. You have what you want, she asked, and now you can go your way. He thanked the old woman for helping him in his need, and he left hell content that everything turned out so fortunately. When he came to the ferryman, he was expected to give the promised answer. Ferry me across first, said the child of good fortune, and then I will tell you how you can be set free. And when you have reached the opposite shore, he gave him the devil's advice. Next time anyone comes who wants to be ferried over, just put the oar in his hand. He came on and came to the town wherein that stood an unfruitful tree, and there too the watchman wanted to know. He said, so he told him what he'd heard from the devil. Kill the mouse which is gnawing at its root, and it will bear golden apples. Then the watchman thanked him and gave him a reward of 2 donkeys laden with gold, which followed him. Finally, he came to a town whose well was dry, and he told the watchman what the devil had said. A toad is beneath toad is in the well beneath the stone. You must find it and kill it, and when the well will again give wine in plenty. The watchman thanked him and also gave him 2 donkeys laden with gold. At last the child of good fortune got home to his wife, who was heartily glad to see him again and hear how he had prospered in everything. To the king he took what he had asked for, the devil's 3 golden hairs. And when the king saw the 4 donkeys laden with gold, he was quite content and said, now all the conditions are fulfilled. You can keep my daughter. But tell me, dear son-in-law, where did all the gold come from? This is a tremendous wealth. I was rowed across the river, answered he, and got there, and it lies on the shore instead of sand. Can I too fetch some of it? Said the king. And then he was quite eager about it. As much as you like, he answered. There's a ferryman on the river. Let him ferry you over, and you can fill your sacks on the other side. The greedy king set out in all haste, and when he came to the river, he beckoned the ferryman to put him across. The ferryman came up and bade him to get in, and when they got to the other shore, he put the oar in his hand and sprang out. But from this time forth the king has had to ferry as a punishment for his sins. Perhaps he is ferrying still. If he is, it is because no one has taken the oar from him.